pleased to come to the floor today in support of Senator Haggerty's legislation. It is so appropriate that we take this up, and I look forward to supporting the legislation as we vote later today, and seeing this move to passage, seeing this become law, and seeing this add to protection for the citizens that live here in D.C. Over the past few years, our nation has certainly witnessed a devastating increase in violent crime. Compared to mid-2019, America's largest cities have experienced a 50% increase in homicides and a 36% increase in aggravated assaults. It's unimaginable that given the rise in violence in this country, the elected officials of the D.C. City Council think it's a good idea to reduce the amount of jail time for violent and deadly crimes. This includes carjackings, and Senator Haggerty referenced one that was taking place in front of the protesters that were out there because they oppose this bill. Now, these crimes are rampant here in our nation's capital. In fact, as of this morning, the Metropolitan Police Department tells us that motor vehicle theft is up more than 100% compared to last year. Homicides are up 33%. And if you look at the direction those stats have gone over the past 10 years, it is not encouraging. Incidences of sex abuse up 120%. Property crime up 30%. You don't have to live in the district to know that something has taken hold here, and reducing penalties for terrorizing innocent civilians is not the way to break free. Citizens should not feel unsafe in their communities, no matter where they live. Today's vote is about protecting the people from this failed leadership, but it's also about holding the D.C. City Council accountable for prioritizing a cynical political maneuver over the safety of the very people that they represent. This body has made a name for itself. This D.C. City Council, this legislative body for the District of Columbia, they have made a name for themselves because they've been cherry picking. They have cherry picked some violations and have chosen to impose some truly ridiculous restrictions on what district residents can and cannot do. They don't deserve the benefit of the doubt here. Right now, the council is ready to retreat, but it would be a dereliction of our duty as senators to allow them to do that. That's why we are supporting Senator Haggerty in his resolution of disapproval and in his work to stop this foolishness from the D.C. Council. We also have a duty to update and improve existing laws to combat criminals as their tactics evolve. Earlier this year, I introduced the REPORT Act, which will go a long way in helping law enforcement tackle child exploitation online. The past few years of hearings with the Consumer Protection Subcommittee have made it clear that we need to modernize our child safety laws. The explosion of social media and the expansion of underage users is making these children vulnerable to predators, and law enforcement simply cannot keep up with what is happening online while they're out trying also to find the burglaries, the robberies, the carjackings. Once the Senate passes the REPORT Act, online platforms are going to be required to report all child sexual abuse material found on their sites to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's cyber tip line. Current law makes that step voluntary, but that standard is not working. We have to change it, and we have to make violating that new standard really hurt. The bill significantly increases fines imposed on platforms that refuse to do this bare minimum. It also requires platforms to report child sex trafficking and enticement crimes. Current law imposes no obligation, none, zero, on platforms to report those materials, which means that most of these crimes are unfortunately going undetected. The last two pieces of the bill will help law enforcement and advocates work together to bring down predators. It includes my End Child Exploitation Act, which extends the retention period for possession of abusive material to 1 year. This will ensure that law enforcement has enough time to access the evidence held by these companies and then prosecute the offenders. It also makes it clear that the vendors working with NCMEC, minors, and parents who report to the cyber tip line won't be held liable for possessing child sexual abuse material. I'm so pleased that so many of my colleagues have come to the floor today to talk about the rise in crime. The backlash against the D.C. crime bill highlights the fundamental difference between the left's priorities and the priorities of the American people. Anyone, anybody with a bit of common sense would look at the D.C. City Council's proposal and ask, why would they even consider sending such a weak on crime message? It is an invitation to criminals to come and carry out their crimes. It's time for the left to revisit their priorities and start paying attention to what the crime stats are telling them. The status quo isn't working, but surrendering to violence, lawlessness, despair isn't the answer either. On the federal level, my Democratic colleagues need to support federal, state, and local law enforcement and demand that this president nominate experienced judges. Here in the Senate, we can help by making sure that police departments are able to hire, train, and equip officers with tools that they need to do their job. Last Congress, Senator Hagerty and I introduced the Restoring Law and Order Act, which would have repurposed the billions of dollars the Democrats handed to the IRS and use that money to support law enforcement and eliminate the rape kit backlog. We can also modernize existing laws that are no longer working. I welcome my Democratic colleagues to come talk with me about how the REPORT Act will help catch child predators who are taking advantage of new technology to find their victims. I encourage them to join Senator Hagerty and I in the Restoring Law and Order, and I encourage each of them to stand today with Senator Hagerty, vote for his resolution, and take a stand against the warped priorities of the D.C. City Council.